I just sold a Lamborghini that I'm, out of partially the thought of cashing in so that I can go shopping for something here and just find a way. I've had a bunch of flood exotic cars.
So are you seeking out a car because you think there's an opportunity? Because my mind was on the other side. Like, ooh, how does a guy like you avoid this problem?
No, we do seek the problem out because my strategy has always been to buy the worst examples of the coolest cars possible. And so I had and these are freshwater floods, which is considerably better than like the saltwater flood from the hurricane that flooded out Freddie's.
He's already selling, boys. Pitch it, Ed.
Yeah, well, it just means that you have
you want to get yourself a freshwater flood.
That's it.
It's the best floods on the market.
That's right. Don't mess with them with saltwater stuff. But sometimes they can work. It's a huge, huge thing. We tried to buy a Bugatti that was driven into the Galveston Bay as insurance fraud a couple of years ago, and that car's moved around a bit. But it's going to be a wild market influence, and that's kind of what I always look for. How can you change the perception of these cars? Like, for instance, so what I was really selling my cars for a couple of weeks ago, I was trying to sell this Murcielago and a Spiker C8 Laviolette that I bought from Missy Elliott a couple of years ago, because I was trying to buy that Bugatti that I mentioned that Mayweather had for a while. It was the Frankfurt Motor Show car, and then Birdman bought it, and then he gave it to Justin Bieber as a present, and then it got bought by the nephew of these scam artist racing drivers.
Wait, so they gave it to Justin Bieber as a present, then he sold it to somebody's nephew?
Yeah, so then that guy sold it to Mayweather.
Liking this Bieber guy more and more.
That's right. And then, I don't know, I'd have to listen to every rap song ever to say that I'd heard a Lil Uzi Vert song, but apparently he owned it for a while. And so it's like a terrible condition Bugatti with a really cool backstory that would be fun to share at Cars and Coffee. But the guy's just, the price is just stupid. So now it's like, well, maybe I'll go flood car shopping in Dubai because there are going to be a ton of them, and it's unclear how they'll be able to liquidate them.
We're talking about the supercars, but let's call that $1 million for the supercars. At least 10 times as many $100,000 cars got flooded. It's like that insurance market is ruined. Like someone is probably jumping off a building or blowing their brains out over there, right? Like somebody's ruined. It's such a, I don't even know. Look, if you live in Abu Dhabi and there's an option for flood insurance, you would never click it.
Right. Yeah, we ran into that in Atlanta in 2009. There was this massive drought, like Lake Lanier, which is the biggest man-made lake in the United States, was down 30 feet. And Sonny Perdue was the governor at the time, and he had this thing where he came out and had a press conference and said, we need to pray for rain. And
it worked.
And it flooded this city like you could not believe. I mean, there were so many, and you got to think, this is 2009. So the real estate market is in the dumps. And so I remember 2010 is when we bought our first house as a married couple, my wife and I. And half of the houses had flood damage because it rained feet in the matter of a month right after this. And I believe God can do a lot of great things. I don't know that he's responding to Sonny Perdue's requests for such things, but that's it. And it was, so that's that's a Pagani Utopia that came out like yesterday. And this guy's driving.
That's an ugly car.
It's hideous. It is absolutely awful.
Who's the market for that?
Can you say the name of it again so Zach can find a good picture?
Pagani Utopia. So Horacio Pagani was a designer for Lamborghini. Utopia, like the ridiculous to say it's the greatest place to ever live or whatever. And so it is, he designed a couple of cars for Lamborghini, the 25th anniversary Countach and the Diablo SE30. And then he went out to build his own car company, and he built a car called the Zonda that came out in 2002 that was incredible. And it's one of the most beautiful modern supercars ever made. And then they made the Wyra that came out in 2014 as a model year in the US. And then this is their third generation car, the Utopia, which is, I think, a terrible regression in styling. If anybody can pull up
it's hideous.
Pagani.
Zach, can you pull up the car from Speed Racer? Because I'm getting nostalgic over it.
You're okay. So you're 100% around the Speed Racer thing, but some of all right. Hang on a minute.
But grab a picture of Pagani Zonda. That's a Wyra, which is reasonably okay. But if you go to the generation prior to that, look up a Zonda Cinque, Cinque.
Oh, you can't say that here.
Now we're demonetized.
They call the Asian grocer near me.
That's a heavily modified Zonda. There are more simplistic versions that aren't quite as.
All right, this is that's a Hot Wheels
see
car.
The Speed Racer car.
That's a Hot Wheels car right there. This is sick too, but like you don't want to drive this. Like I don't want to drive this.
Well, but and to be honest, there's a huge market of people who are spending the money that their granddad worked really hard for that support companies like Pagani and Koenigsegg and Bugatti and things like that. And a lot of them are now in the Middle East, and yes, so a lot of these cars are now underwater.
Zach, show that car I linked in the chat. That thing's always appealed to me.
Are there any cars, Ed, where you sit in the middle and there's one seat like a Formula One car?
So the McLaren F1 that came out in '93 was the first, widely known car to have a center seating position. There were some Ferrari concept cars and things like that. They still had 2 seats flanking them, so it was a 3-seat car. There are a couple of track-only cars, like McLaren just released the Solara that is a single-seat car. Lamborghini had a concept called the Iguista that is a single-seat car. But in general, the F1 is the one that you drive in the center. They made a Speedtail limited run of cars that is the same idea, and that is currently in F1 they made 106 cars, 67 road cars I think, and they're worth 20-ish million for a road car, and then the race cars are kind of a little more than that. And those for people generally our age, under 60 years old, it's the ultimate car. And I think that there'll be $100 million cars before too terribly long, just because it is as good as it gets. We borrowed one for a production that we did called Car Trek a couple of years ago, and I drove it around a bit, and it's phenomenal. Obviously, it's a 90s car, so the brakes are weak, the exhaust isn't all that great, but it's still as good as it needs to be for a car guy to justify its value, which is kind of the question of any of them. But it was kind of somewhat, some would say, the first hypercar, and it used a BMW V12, 627 horsepower, and it was the fastest car of all time. So 241 miles an hour that the Bugatti Veyron would eventually beat.
Christ.
Yeah, so they're plenty awesome. Yeah, that's one. That's a low mirror early car, and most of them are silver. There's a lot of other interesting cars. We've chased one for years that was owned by the biggest drug runner for El Chapo, this guy named Humberto Ojeda. It's a brown car with a red interior and gold wheels. That was maybe a payment from some Italian clients for some product, but it went into Mexico in like '98. And this guy he owned the car, and he didn't drive it all that much, but he got gunned down in his armored but also gold-plated Jeep Grand Cherokee. And the vehicle got shot like 300 times, but one bullet went in through the lock cylinder and hit him in the abdomen. And so he was able to drive home before he died, and his son was like crouched in the footwell of the car. So he got home, and then he died, and he never told anybody where the keys were to his McLaren F1, and it's been lost since then. And so I've made a handful of videos chasing that exact car. And it's been one of the more compelling storylines.
Trap Lord Whips.
That's it. Yeah. It's a very interesting Instagram account to follow that one. But yeah, so it's the only one in that specification, but we think it's probably still in Mexico.
How much would that be worth if someone found it? I guess maybe it when it's that rare, does it just come down to like which, Saudi sheik wants it the most?
Well, there's a lot of big American car collectors that want them. And so it's if it was free and clear and perfect, it's worth $20 million. But it's been sitting for decades. And the recommissioning of a car like that is millions of dollars. It's got the hair on it of having been a drug lord's car, which some people wouldn't like. I would love. And then there's also a question of if you buy a car from the cartel, then it's sort of like that it came from or an ill-gotten way. And then the question is, well, will the U.S. government seize it from you? And so you'd have to probably call the DEA if you even had it. And there's a lot of people that think I have it stored in my basement, but I don't.
That'd be sweet.
It would be really, really sweet.
As far as they know, you don't.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wink,
That's
wink.
right. We're going to maintain that narrative as long as we can. And so you probably have to call them and say, all right, what do I have to pay you to not care that I have this car so that I can ultimately put a license plate on it and drive? But it was wild.
They take money to not care?
Yeah, absolutely. They take money to not
I'm
care.
naive. Okay. That's
Everybody does.
Yeah,
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, they'll let you sell the drugs if you just tell them, how much of it's theirs. But it's So we've been fascinated by the story of that car for a few years, because I had a guy years ago off Instagram just message me saying that it was available and for sale. And, we've always thought that if it transacted exactly as in the circumstance as it is, it's probably a couple $1 million or $3 million, which if I sold everything I owned, I might be close to. So I find it fascinating in that regard, because it is that ultimate holy grail car. But I think it's either buried in Mexico or long ago it sold to somebody who will never tell us that. So
that's a risky business deal. Would you really it sounds like you roll somewhere approximately-ish your net worth, and then you need to find a few million to prep it for sale, ? And then you make a profit, I hope.
Yeah, that's the gamble. Exactly. And that's the kind of play that I've always done. I've done that many times with my net worth into cars, and a lot of them have turned out really handsomely.
You just if DEA's coming after you anyway, you just Thelma Louise that bitch off.
That's it. And make sure you got the GoPros rolling.
You're not getting me or the car.
Wow.
So, I mean, to me, most of what I've done professionally has been out of the motivation to be able to afford the next car. And so it's, I don't really think I'm ever going to find this one, but it's been a fun chase over the last few years. I guess a month or so ago, a guy contacted me claiming that he had found it on the Isle of Man and that it was going to be for sale for about $2 million, and that it was in the estate of Sir Frank Williams of Williams Racing. And this happens to me because I've been very public about wanting to find the car. It happens to me every few months, but this guy was the most communicative and the most, it seemed reasonable, but he could never come up with pictures. And that's always the thing, is there's no pictures of this car since 98.
He'd have had so many pictures when he first contacted you. He'd have wanted them. He'd be sitting in that bitch.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're a car guy, there's no way he's not going to pop the hood and look.
Right.
I would suck
On
at this business. I was fooled by the picture with the toucan.
God, they've got huge birds over there in Abu Dhabi. That's the scariest thing about the desert is the toucans. They just swim right up to you, peck you.
Yeah, they fucking. Then I saw the next picture. They stole my Lucky Charm.